What do you think? I mean, really? We're at the precipice. Are we going to go over? The only way to solve our problems is to fall all the way over.
Well, let me start with the political answer.
Chaos before we come back to reality?
Sure.
Is there any government, is there any system that can bring us back from this before we completely fail, like Rome failed?
Like, even if we elected Ron Paul, could he right the ship? Is it possible for anybody to right the ship, or are we simply electing the next captain of the Titanic?
We are on our way over the edge.
And let me answer politically by first avoiding your question. And in order to put my answer in context, give you my long-term view, my big picture at least, what gives me hope, what makes me an optimist. Because I believe that human evolution, and this is abstract from the biological, you don't have to talk, it's not about science, but human social evolution. Our ability to make our lives better from generation to generation, the ability to provide greater means of achieving our simple goals of health and happiness with every generation is improving. And as I said, with the technology, the exponential growth curves, all of these things are leading us to the point where these fundamental truths will be undeniable. In the way that hygiene 500 years ago was a rare luxury, and today having the time to indulge in politics as we all are today is still somewhat of a rare luxury. Few Americans, as much TV as they watch, could say that they don't have the time to be engaged like this. But there are a lot of people for whom this is a luxury. And I think as we improve, as we continue to progress, we are going to achieve those things inevitably. And it's a process of 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards. I'm not so delusional as to see that it's all sunshine and roses here on out and that's all it is. 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. And that happens, that's a gross oversimplification, to use a turn of phrase, of course, but 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards. That happens in many different ways, on many different threads, simultaneously. And you could argue that the founding of the Federal Reserve in 1913 was the start of a major step backwards that we're still in the middle of. And you could say still that within that time, and you could say it's a global step backwards. If you understand the real implications, if you really studied the Fed, if you really understood the implications of what it means to have a central bank that sucks value out of every exchange using that medium of exchange in the entire global economy, and what it does for the power structure in terms of distorting the natural economy, the allocation of resources and labor capital, and you really follow that extensively, pretty easy to see that that's a global step backwards that started in 1913. And then within that time frame, you can say we've taken lots of steps forward. Lots of countries have come out of poverty, have had their own industrial revolutions, have had, obviously all sorts of advances that way. Even here in the United States, if you want to put it in the same social dynamic terms, we had a gay rights movement, we had a civil rights movement, we had a women's rights movement. And I'll disagree with every way that those were instituted in government. But I think what those all represent in terms of embracing that common humanity and respecting the liberty and the divine qualities of every human soul, those are steps forward. But the overriding, the overarching step backwards that we're in the middle of right now is the Federal Reserve System. This amazing ability for people to see value sucked out of the economy. See this is at the crux of this. That human beings, almost all, know about inflation. I mean, when I was a kid, hey, comic books used to be a lot cheaper. How come this one says a nickel on the cover and this one says $1.50? I don't get it. And you ask your parents and they don't know. But they know that it's happening, and they don't ask, and they don't bother to figure it out. But now with the internet, just as an example of ways that we can communicate and share information much more freely, when you have the wealth of human knowledge right there in your pocket, for those of us who grew up with the internet, have it hardwired in a certain way, you can lie to us, but you can't get away with it for very long. And when you go, why do we have inflation? It's a Google search away, and you can figure it out. And you can do it on your own time, at your own pace, and you can wrap your head around what seems like a difficult subject, but is really quite a simple one when you understand how the currency was forced on the economy, not welcomed by a free market. So, to come to actually answering your question now.
You've just told me how we got to the precipice.
Yes. Yes.
Now,
and I've pointed out that the apparent precipice that we have come to in the grander historical scheme is a bump in the road. It's a step backwards. Might be a big one. Might be the biggest one humanity's ever seen, but I doubt it.
So Rome failed, man survived.
Yes.
USA will fail, but we will survive.
I wouldn't go that far. And I'm not Gerald Celente here.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make the prediction that, hey, there's going to be a dollar. I mean, everybody's trying to make $1 million saying the dollar's going to collapse in 3 months or 4 months or 5 months or 6 months, and you got to buy gold. And the thing about the Federal Reserve System and the people that manipulate it, I'll tell you, I'll give you my one immediate prediction for the precipice that we are coming to. Because as the dollar starts to really collapse, and you can say it is already, it's starting. We see the curves accelerating, right? We see that as you approaching the precipice of a vertical line on the graph.
At this point.
No. Well, maybe you might be. But more importantly, what's going to happen as it starts to collapse is that there's going to be a showdown between the people that get it, the people that understand free markets, the people that understand capitalism, that understand that the medium of exchange is nothing more than any other good provided, nothing subject to all the same economic laws as any other good or service provided in the economy, and the people that want the next scam to be imposed. And that's going to be a global fiat currency. And there are already rumblings of this. And you've heard the plans for the Amero, we've seen the euro as an example. I mean, why do we need to call people who talk about the Amero conspiracy theorists when a conspiracy to consolidate the currency just happened in Europe at a much, much larger scale? Or rather, a much more difficult political scale with all the countries and different currency systems that came together to form the euro, versus what we would have here if it was the Amero. And for those of you that don't know, the Amero, I don't like to follow this stuff. I don't like to dwell on the various manipulations of government, the next things that are coming. I try not to worry about the various proposals for the next phase of government and statism. Where did the Amero plan come from? That came out of a summit, right? Between there's the North American, there's some annual economic summit, and so there were talks about the North American Union, and one of the ways of transitioning to that was having a currency for North America that would be Canada, Mexico, and the United States, called the Amero. And so there's going to be a showdown. And when you say the precipice, I really think that all of that centers around the dollar system. Every time a civil liberty is taken from an individual American by a man with a badge and a gun, it's still true that 40 cents out of every dollar that went to his salary in some way came from the Chinese. And when the dollar system collapses, when the dollar system that makes all of the encroachments of government possible collapses, that's what we're going to have. And I have enough faith in what we are capable of as a species at this point, with technology, with communications, that whatever collapse we may experience around the dollar collapsing won't be a long one. And it'll be one that we'll be able to see what's going on like never before. Every other historical incident of this nature in the world's history has been done to people who are in relative isolation. You could read a newspaper about it. Now you can get on the internet and look at cameras anywhere in the world. You have that entire global perspective. We have that shared vision of the world. And that's going to keep us from falling for the next scam. So I'm optimistic. I think there may be a transition. I think we're going to come to this precipice. When we think of the precipice as the US dollar and the entire American economy, the global economy, going to come crashing down. You look down and you're like, holy crap, that's really far. That's going to hurt. And then you get shoved over and you land and you're like, oh, hey, that wasn't so bad. And I really think while there may be a lot of pain and suffering and some tumultuous times following that, I think what we're going to be able to do is very rapidly replace the system of fiat currency that we're dependent on with alternatives, with barter, with communities. We're already doing it, and I'm not a fan of Bitcoin in the sense that it's another fiat currency. But hey, if you had to choose between a fiat currency called the US dollar, where when value gets sucked out of it, it goes to the government, or Bitcoin, which is like this fantasy online currency that actually is somewhat practical and people are able to use as a medium of exchange, it's kind of an obvious choice. If I could snap my fingers and have everybody trading in bitcoins instead of dollars overnight, I would do it. But that's not the answer. Because when the system collapses or when the dollar collapses and people go, holy crap, that's how currency works. And people will be paying attention to that. My prediction is that what we'll get actually rather rapidly is various competing currencies backed on commodity indexes on the internet that are all digitally calculated. And one will emerge as the standard. And I think that's what we're going to have, and I don't think it's going to take that long for it to come together. This is why I think this is why I keep MREs in my house. You know, I don't have a bunker with like 20 years of food, 30 feet underground, and you know, I have a few cases of MREs at home.
Because they taste so good.
I have, yeah, exactly. They taste delicious. They taste like constipation. And I think they're designed that way. For any veterans in the room, you know what I'm talking about. So something's coming. I think it's important to be ready. It's important to be independent. It's important to be self-sustained. It's important to be in touch with your community. It's important to be connected to others. And the internet gives us an ability to do that even locally, like never before. So that's my answer to your question. Does that answer your question, Elise? So I'll tell you where I'm coming from.
You absolutely told me it's not a matter of if, it's only a matter of when.
Yep, I agree. Yep,
You told me that we're going to fall over.
There is going to be...
We may come back more quickly this time, but we're going.
There is going to be some significant collapse of the system centered around the devaluation of the US dollar.